Hi guys! So I want to talk about watercolor paper scraps, like when you go to cut a larger piece of paper into maybe an A4 or 5, and then you're left with these smaller pieces. And so I want to share some things I like to do with them, so you don't end up throwing them out, and hopefully saving some money too. If you want to see what materials I use, like the brand of paper, check out the description below, because there's no other way to find out. So I will be showing 3 watercolor paintings, all on these scraps. And it was such a fun challenge to come up with ideas that suited the shape of the paper, like with this long one. So I decided to do these paintings because I wanted to test out some techniques. I wanted to experiment more with using a lot of water, and also seeing how the paint reacted when I added water at different states of drying. Experimenting with techniques and paint is one of my favourite uses of these scraps, because working with 100% cotton can feel really different from cheaper paper. Even simple washes can feel very different. So it's best to practice techniques that you're unsure about on 100% cotton first before going on to a full painting. But if you're like me, who tends to feel guilty by practicing techniques on more expensive paper, which is a bad mentality, but I just can't shake it, well, that's when I can use these paper scraps. You can use them for practicing washes, or colour mixing, or wet on wet like I'm doing here. So I mentioned that I was going to show 3 paintings in this video, and I'd love to know which one you guys liked out of the 3. Another thing that these scraps are really useful for is thumbnailing, which are small sketches that are used for planning larger paintings. Like planning things such as composition, colour combinations, and general ideas. You could even use them for practicing your approach for the final painting. Think of it like visual note-taking. I do a few thumbnails before starting most of my paintings, especially recently, unless it was something that I intended to be a sketch but ended up being a full painting. It's really helped my workflow ever since I started doing it more. So if you don't already do it, I highly recommend starting, or just giving it a go. Another great use is to have one by your side while painting, so that if you're unsure about the colour you just mixed, you can quickly swatch it. On the topic of swatches, you can use them as swatch cards to test out new colours you may have gotten. Then you can see how the colour reacts to things such as different amounts of water, other colours, or simply to see what it looks like. So this is the finished version of the painting. Or I should say unfinished, because I forgot what I wanted the painting to be. So I just stopped painting and called it a day. I don't mind the ethereal feel from the unfinished rendering though. So this painting here was done on a really small piece. I think it was slightly smaller than my hand. Unfortunately, this was the only footage I got of it. But I was testing out a really different colour combination as well as the wet on wet. So for this one it was done on a square shaped piece. At this point I became really comfortable with the wet on wet, and was really just playing around with it. The process to me looked really pretty, and I thought the effects I got out of it were pretty cool. So I want to mention one more thing that doesn't just apply to the scraps, but can still save money in regards to watercolour paper. You can actually paint on the other side of some watercolour paper. This really does depend on the paper though. Most of the 100% cotton papers have allowed me to do this, but the cheaper ones have not. The watercolours react too uncontrollably on those ones. When you do paint on the other side, the paper's texture may be different. So I highly recommend experimenting with the paper you have, and see if it allows you to do this. I don't usually do it on full paintings, but if it was just a study, I'll do another study or maybe some tests on the other side. Like maybe these small paintings that I'm doing here, I'd paint on the other side. So yeah, thanks for watching. I really hope some of these tips were helpful. If you have any other uses for these scraps, I'd really love to know.